The police said he died alone. No one with him. No last words. Just a hotel room and a heart that stopped. I believed them. I planned the funeral. I wore black. I cried in front of everyone who loved him. And then 3 weeks later, his phone arrived in a brown envelope. The carrier said it had been found at the scene. Delayed in processing. I almost didn't turn it on. But I did. And the last text he ever received wasn't from me. It wasn't from his mother. It wasn't from anyone whose name I recognized. But somehow she already knew he was dead before I called to tell her. My husband's name was Daniel. He was 41. Careful with his words. Careful with everything. That was what I loved about him first, the way he never said anything he didn't mean. 14 years of marriage. A house in Columbus. 2 kids who still ask for him at dinner. I thought I knew every corner of that man. I didn't know a single room. Daniel died on a Tuesday in March. He was in Pittsburgh for work, a 2-night conference, same as every quarter. He called me Monday evening. Said the hotel bed was terrible. Said he missed the kids. Said he loved me. Normal. Routine. Unremarkable. I told him I'd make his favorite dinner Thursday when he got home. He never came home. The call came at 6:48 a.m. A detective named Rourke. Flat voice. Practiced. He said Daniel had been found unresponsive in his hotel room. Apparent cardiac event. No signs of struggle. Nothing suspicious. I remember the floor feeling soft beneath me, like it had stopped being solid. I asked if he was alone. Rourke said yes. Housekeeping found him. Door was locked from the inside. Alone. I held on to that word like it was a kindness. The funeral was 12 days later. His colleagues came. His college friends. His mother, who didn't speak to me the entire reception, but that wasn't new. Everyone said the same things. He was so loved. He was so good. You were so lucky to have him. I smiled until my face ached. That night I lay in our bed and pressed my face into his pillow and tried to remember what he smelled like. I was already starting to forget. The envelope came on a Wednesday. No return address. Just our home address in black ink, block letters. Inside, Daniel's phone. Cracked screen, corner of the case chipped. And a handwritten note from the carrier company. Apologize for the delay. Item logged at scene, held during standard processing. Returned to next of kin per records. I sat at the kitchen table for a long time. The kids were at school. The house was completely quiet. I charged the phone. His lock screen was a photo of our youngest. Her gap-toothed smile. Her 7th birthday. Balloons behind her. I knew his passcode. His birthday reversed. He'd never changed it in 10 years. I don't know what I was looking for. I told myself I just wanted to feel close to him. To scroll through his photos. To see what he saw in his last days. That was true. It just wasn't the whole truth. The last text he received came in at 11:52 p.m. on the Monday he died. He was found Tuesday morning. The name in his phone was just a letter. R, no last name. No photo. The message read, "Don't do this. Please. I'm outside. Just open the door." I read it 4 times. My hands were completely steady. That frightened me more than anything. I scrolled up. Weeks of messages. Hundreds of them. I won't tell you everything I read that night. But I'll tell you this. She wasn't new. And the way he wrote to her, careful, deliberate, never saying anything he didn't mean, was exactly the way he used to write to me. I put the phone face down on the table. I walked to the sink. I turned on the cold water. I stood there until I stopped shaking. Then I picked the phone back up. Because there was one thing still pulling at me. One thing I couldn't explain away. She had texted him at 11:52 p.m. I'm outside. Just open the door. But Daniel was found at 6:48 a.m. the next morning. Locked room. No signs of struggle. Cardiac event. If she was outside that door, then she was the last person to see my husband alive. And no one ever mentioned her name. Not once. I didn't call the detective that night. I don't know why. Maybe I wasn't ready to make it real. Maybe I knew that once I said it out loud, everything, the funeral, the grief, the version of Daniel I'd buried, would have to be dismantled. So I sat with it alone. Like I'd been sitting with everything alone for the past 3 weeks. I searched the number. No results. Prepaid, probably. The kind you buy with cash and don't register. That told me something. People who use phones like that aren't careless. They're careful. She was careful. So was Daniel. I went back through the messages. I made myself read slowly this time. Not looking for pain. Looking for information. There were 2 things that stopped me cold. The first, 6 weeks before he died, Daniel had written to her. I told her this is the last trip. After Pittsburgh, I'm done.
I mean it this time.
This time. That phrase sat in my chest like a stone. It meant there had been other times he'd promised to end it. It meant she had heard that before. It meant I had been the plan he kept returning to, not the life he chose. The second thing was a photo. He'd sent it to her 4 months earlier. It was our living room. Christmas morning. Our kids tearing into presents. The tree lit up behind them. My back was to the camera. I was handing something to our youngest. He had photographed our family and sent it to her. I still don't have words for what that felt like. I closed the phone. I picked it up again 10 minutes later. I found her last message. I'm outside, just opened the door, and I looked at the timestamp again. 11:52 p.m. Then I opened Daniel's sent messages. He never replied. Not to that message. Not to the 3 before it, that same night. She had texted him 4 times between 10 p.m. and midnight. He hadn't answered a single one. That detail cracked something open in me. Because here's what I knew about Daniel. He always replied. Even when he was busy. Even when he was exhausted. A man that careful doesn't go silent without a reason. So either he was already gone by 10 p.m. or something made him stop responding. Both possibilities terrified me in different ways. I called Detective Rourke the next morning. I kept my voice level. I told him I'd received Daniel's phone. I told him about the messages. About the woman. About the timestamps. There was a pause on his end. Then he said, "Mrs. Harlan, we did speak to a witness at the hotel that night." The floor went soft again. A witness, I said. A woman who stated she was a colleague. She said she'd stopped by to drop off conference materials. Said she knocked, got no answer, assumed he was asleep. We had no reason to pursue it further. Cause of death was cardiac. Clean.
Clean.
I asked him her name. Another pause. I'm not able to share that without. I told him I already knew she wasn't a colleague. Silence. Long enough that I understood. He had known she wasn't just a colleague either. I drove to Pittsburgh 3 days later. I told my sister I needed space. I dropped the kids with her and I drove 2.5 hours in complete silence. I had one goal. The hotel kept guest records. I knew they wouldn't give them to me. But hotels have bars. And bartenders talk. The bartender remembered Daniel. Of course he did. Daniel was the kind of man people remembered.
Warm.
Good tipper. Asked her name and used it. He remembered the woman too. Came in around 9. Met your husband at the bar. They seemed like they knew each other well. He paused. I assumed they were together. Like, together. I'm sorry. I asked him to describe her.
He did.
And then he said something that made me grip the edge of the bar. She left before him though. I remember because she got a phone call and her whole face changed. She grabbed her coat and left in a hurry. Didn't even finish her drink. She left before him. She was gone before 10 p.m. But her text started at 10 p.m. from outside his door. She left the bar. And then she came back. I sat in my car in the parking garage for a long time, running through it. She leaves suddenly, phone call, face changes. Returns within the hour. Stands outside his door. He doesn't answer. 4 texts. Silence. And Daniel, who always replied, who was careful about everything, said nothing. What happens to a man between 9 p.m. and 10 p.m. in a hotel room alone that makes him go completely silent? I had one theory. I wasn't ready to say it yet. But it was there. It had been there since the moment I read I'm outside. Part 3. I found her on the 4th day. I wasn't supposed to. I had no legal right, no official access, no one helping me. But grief makes you resourceful in ways you never expected. And anger makes you unstoppable. The bartender had given me enough. Her description. The phone call that changed her face. The way she left in a hurry. I cross-referenced Daniel's emails, his work account, which I had access to as his emergency contact after death. It took 2 hours. There was only one woman on his conference roster whose name started with R, Rachel Voss. I said her name out loud in my car, just to hear it. 14 years of marriage, and she was a name I'd never heard once. Rachel Voss, 38, senior analyst. Daniel's company, different division. Based in Philadelphia. She had been at that conference. Of course she had. I didn't contact her right away. I went home first. Kissed my kids. Made dinner. Helped with homework. I sat at the table and watched my daughter laugh at something her brother said, and I thought, she has no idea her world already ended. She just doesn't know it yet. Neither did I, really. Because what I found next made everything before it look small. I went through Daniel's personal email. The account I didn't know existed. I found it because Rachel Voss had sent one message to his work address, just 3 months ago, and it had a thread attached. A thread from another account. Daniel's other account. The one with a name I didn't recognize. A version of himself I had never met. The emails went back for years. For years. Our youngest was 3 when this started. I was recovering from a miscarriage we never told anyone about. Daniel had held me in our bed and told me we would be okay. He was writing to her that same week. I know because I checked the dates. I checked every date. But it wasn't the affair that broke me open in the end. I had already survived learning about that. What I wasn't prepared for was the email dated 6 days before he died. Rachel had written to him. I went to a doctor. You need to know something and I can't tell you over text. I need to see you in Pittsburgh. Please don't say no. Daniel had replied within 4 minutes. I'll be there. Don't tell anyone. I read that exchange 7 times. A doctor. Something she couldn't say over text. Something she needed to tell him in person, urgently, 6 days before his heart stopped. I called a friend of mine, Diane, a nurse, someone I trusted completely. I didn't tell her everything. I just asked her, what kinds of things would make someone go to a doctor urgently and need to tell a partner in person rather than over text? She listed several things. The last one stopped my breath. Honestly, if she'd been diagnosed with something genetic, something hereditary, something the other person's family might need to know about. Something hereditary. Daniel had died of a cardiac event. No history of heart disease. Healthy. Active. Every checkup clean. The medical examiner had ruled it natural. But I had never pushed for details. I had been too broken to ask questions. I made an appointment with the medical examiner's office the following week. The woman I spoke to was careful with her words. She said the cardiac event was real. Undeniable. She said there was no evidence of external cause. Then I asked her if anything had been found in his system. She paused in that particular way people pause when they're deciding how much to tell you. There were trace elements of a compound that appeared consistent with a pre-existing condition. I asked her to be specific. Another pause. A potassium imbalance. Significant enough to trigger an arrhythmia in someone with an underlying vulnerability. I asked, would that vulnerability be hereditary? She said, it could be. I asked, could that imbalance be induced by something external? She didn't answer right away. And in that silence, the theory I'd been carrying for 2 weeks became something else entirely. I called Rachel Voss that night. I didn't plan what to say. I just dialed. She picked up on the second ring. When I said my name, I'm Daniel's wife, she made a sound I'll never forget. Not surprise. Not guilt. Something that sounded almost like relief. Like she'd been waiting for this call. Like she was exhausted from waiting. She said, I've been trying to figure out how to reach you for weeks. I said, then talk. And she did. She told me about the doctor. She told me about what she'd gone to Pittsburgh to tell him. And then she told me something that made every assumption I had built collapse completely. She said, I wasn't the only one who knew about his condition. She said, someone else knew first. She said a name I recognized. A name that had sat in the front row at my husband's funeral and held my hand while I cried. The name Rachel said was Margaret, Daniel's mother. I had never liked her. I had always told myself that was my failing, my insecurity, my inability to be enough for a woman who believed no one was enough for her son. 14 years of strained dinners. 14 years of comments wrapped in kindness. 14 years of her hand on Daniel's arm, pulling him slightly away from me in every room. I had called it difficult. I should have called it what it was. Rachel told me everything. 6 months before Daniel died, Margaret had approached her. Not confronted.
Approached.
She had known about the affair for over a year. Had said nothing to Daniel. Nothing to me. She had simply watched. And waited. And when the moment was useful, she made contact. She told me she wasn't angry, Rachel said. She said she understood. She said Daniel had never been happy. She said I was probably good for him. Rachel's voice was flat recounting this. Like she still couldn't believe she'd sat across from that woman and felt, briefly, understood. She asked me questions. About his health. Whether he'd ever mentioned heart problems. Whether I'd noticed anything. Rachel had thought it was concern. It wasn't concern. Margaret had known about the hereditary cardiac condition for decades. It had killed Daniel's father at 44. She had never told Daniel. Never told his doctors.
Never told me.
She had simply carried that information like a private possession, something that belonged to her alone. But knowing about the condition wasn't the thing that ended me. This was 3 weeks before Pittsburgh. Daniel had finally told his mother he was ending the affair, that he was going to recommit to our marriage, that he wanted to be fully present for our kids. Rachel confirmed it. He had told her the same thing. He had meant it this time. And Margaret, who had spent 14 years believing I was wrong for her son, had realized she was about to lose the leverage the affair had quietly given her. As long as Daniel was compromised, he needed her silence. The moment he became a good husband again, he became someone who might also become a good son-in-law. Someone who might pull away from her completely. The potassium imbalance. The medical examiner had said it could be induced externally. I had looked it up after that call. Certain medications, administered incorrectly or in combination, could trigger it. Margaret was a retired nurse. She had visited Daniel the week before Pittsburgh. A lunch I hadn't attended. A lunch Daniel had mentioned only briefly. Mom came by.
You know how she is.
It was fine. I want to be precise about what I know and what I don't. I don't have proof of what Margaret did or didn't do at that lunch. I don't know exactly what passed between them. What I know is this. A woman with medical knowledge, who knew her son had an undiagnosed hereditary cardiac vulnerability, who had reason to want him destabilized, was alone with him 1 week before he died. And his heart stopped in a locked hotel room at 43. With a woman texting frantically from outside the door. And a wife at home who trusted everyone in that funeral room. I took everything to a different detective. Not Rourke. Someone I found through a lawyer. Someone who didn't already have a clean narrative to protect. I handed over the phone, the emails, the medical examiner's notes, Rachel's account. I sat in that office and I watched him read, and I watched his face change. He looked up at me and said, "How long have you been carrying this alone?" I said, 41 days. He said, "Not anymore." The investigation was reopened 4 months later. I can't tell you how it ended. Not because I don't know. Because some of it is still moving through a system that moves slower than grief does. What I can tell you is that Margaret no longer comes to Sunday dinners. What I can tell you is that my kids ask about her sometimes and I tell them she's been busy. What I can tell you is that I found a therapist who doesn't flinch at complicated things. I still sleep on my side of the bed.
I don't know when that will change.
Maybe it won't. Daniel was not the man I thought he was. That is a true sentence, and it lives in me uncomfortably alongside this one. He was also trying to come back. Whether that matters, whether it should matter, is something I'm still working out. Grief, I've learned, is not a single clean emotion. It's a room full of people who don't like each other, all trying to speak at once. I kept his phone. I don't look at it anymore. But I keep it in the drawer beside my bed because it is the thing that told me the truth when everyone else had decided I didn't need it. A dead man's phone. The most honest thing he ever gave me. If you were me, would you have kept looking? Or would you have let the locked door stay locked and kept the version of him you loved? Because I've met people who would have chosen the dark.
Some nights, I understand why.
Next time, a woman receives a letter postmarked the day her sister disappeared. The handwriting is her sister's. The letter is dated 2 weeks after she was declared dead.